I'm Daniel Brockhage. I write at ofnaturesgod.com as Rivan Elan. I write at SabersEdge online as Daniel Saber. I use those professional names because my experience in the military, school, and life has taught me that people can't pronounce Brockhage. Um, the only place I've found where they pronounce Brockhage all at once on the first try is Germany. I was sitting on the Strassenbahn as an American soldier and I had my name tag. And this elderly German woman was sitting across from me. Well, I perceived her as elderly at the time, but I was only 20 years old, so maybe she wasn't as old as I thought she was. But she looked at my name tag and she went, Brockhage? And I said, Ja, mein Großvater und Großmutter habt. Dude, you're not helping. You're not helping. You shake the whole board when you do that. Mein Großvater und Großmutter kommt aus Deutschland. Um, and obviously I was there in the United States Army. So uh, my grandparents came from Germany on my dad's side, second generation German. Um, on my mother's side, we were Irish and American, and that goes all the way back to before the American Revolution, from Virginia, Kentucky, Illinois, Pennsylvania. Long, long time. I, I could join the Sons and Daughters of the American Revolution. I could join the Grand Army of the Republic for the Civil War because I have ancestors that fought for the Union. I can join the Sons of the Confederacy because I had ancestors that fought for the Confederacy. The Civil War, as you can see, is one of my favorite time periods. Because of my study of the Civil War and my love of cavalry, I joined the cavalry, and I'm a disabled American vet because I was injured when I served in the cavalry and hurt my back. As I said, I have the professional names that I've only heard pronounced correctly in Germany. Daniel Saber and Rivan Elan seem to be much easier for people. So in Of Nature's God, I write as Rivan Elan. I've also had websites and blog talk radio shows as that name. So it made sense when I was felt that God was leading me to write and speak on religious topics that I would use that term. People who knew me only by my voice knew me as Rivan Elan from websites and radio, while people who had seen me in person knew me as Pastor Daniel or Reverend Daniel, and I figured that they would recognize me. Um, so I went by the pen name that I had used earlier. For Daniel Saber, I did that simply because nobody can spell Brockhage. If you really wanted a real TikTok challenge, you might say, pronounce and spell Brockhage, and people wouldn't be able to do it. It's much easier just to pour a bucket of ice water over your head than to say and spell Brockhage. So I write as Rivan Elan and Daniel Saber. What I'm talking to you about is I am a disabled vet. I don't like um, drawing on charity, but my wife has also been disabled, and we are now trying to get by and support a family of three on around $2,000 a month, which paying for house payments and car payments and everything else, that gets a little tight. I have been in a situation where I need to draw on food pantries in order to make sure my family stays fed. But I'm keeping track of which ones I draw on and what I've drawn so that when things get better for me, I can pay them back because that's just the way I was raised. I know none of them expect to be paid back, but that's the way I am. Um, so I come to you because I have these two websites that I'm working on, and I work on them every day. I have read a lot. I have studied a lot. My undergraduate degree was in political science and international relations, specifically with a um, side in English and political philosophy. I also have more than 20 hours in criminal justice and English and history, physics and astronomy, military science, a wide range because I changed my majors. I started in college right after high school, after I joined the reserves. I was trained in the reserves, and then I went to college, and then I went on active duty, and there was a year a gap of about 10 years before I went back to college and finished my undergraduate degree. The Army gave me a regular Army scholarship. Tuck, no. Army gave me a regular Army scholarship to, he's after my feather. I told you I was in the cavalry. One of the traditions of cavalry, if you see me on the street, I will be wearing my cavalry hat. I served in the 8th Cavalry, which is why there's an 8 on the cross sabers. The thing on top is Mustang, which says honor and courage, is the symbol of the 8th Cavalry. So um, you're distracting, Tuckles. But I went through college. I had several different majors, and the Army paid me to go back and get my undergraduate degree and to get a commission. And I was going to get a commission in military intelligence because not only serving in the cavalry, but I switched during the Cold War, and I felt that the threat of communism was so great that I volunteered to become a counterintelligence special agent. And I served in military intelligence. Was transferred to the S2 shop, which is the intelligence division of my cavalry squadron, once they accepted me as a CIA agent, and while I was pending to go. And so I worked in the intel shop, and I had the benefit of a staff sergeant, and I don't have his permission to use his name, so we'll just call him Staff Sergeant. And he dearly wanted me to not be a counterintelligence agent. He wanted me to be an intelligence analyst. And he spent the next 6 months while I was waiting for my school date to teach me everything he knew about intelligence analysis. And it was a handy time because we had to do the intelligence preparation of the battlefield for my cavalry unit because the brigade battle book had been compromised and we had to redo our battle positions. Um, so I had some training, practical hands-on training as intelligence analyst, but I have been trained at Fort Huachuca, Arizona, as a counterintelligence special agent, and I served in that role for many years in strategic intelligence, not in a tactical intelligence unit. Um, because, as I said, I thought the threat of communism was sufficient that even though I loved being in the cavalry, I was a cavalryman and a drill sergeant. Um, I wanted to do something more active to defend the country, and so I took that role. Uh, while I was there, the Soviet Union began to fall apart, and I thought some of those threats were past us, and we didn't have to worry about it. And um, I returned to school, um, or I was in school because they'd been waiting on my commission, but I had been injured at ROTC Advanced Camp and injured my back again, which I had done previously when I was stationed in Germany. And the injury had me reevaluated, and they decided that they weren't going to commission me because I'd lost 20% of my movement. It's gotten worse over the years through car accidents and other things. Um, and so that they held off on that. And I needed a new career. I thought about criminal justice, and but then with my back bad, I couldn't serve on a beat cop like I wanted to. So I didn't like any of the desk jobs that tended to go with criminal justice. I didn't want to be a parole officer. I didn't want to do other things of that sort. Uh, and at some point, God intercepted me and did what he apparently tried to do when I was 12, according to my mother. He was send me into the ministry. So I went into the ministry. I went to St. Paul School of Theology and served as a United Methodist pastor for several years in Missouri. And then went back to school when I had to take care of my mother. She had Parkinson's disease, and I went home to take care of her and decided I would go back to school and get my doctorate because one of the things I had always wanted to do was teach at the university either political science or history. And I felt that I'd been through enough different things in my life, I'd experienced enough things in my life, that now I could be an effective teacher and have stories of real life besides just the things that I knew from books. And I read a lot of books. My sister gave me a challenge when I was in first grade. I was bothering her. I wanted her to read my favorite stories, which included Curious George and other stories that we got from the library. And apparently I was really bothering her, and she tossed me a copy of The Hobbit. And she said, "Here, read this." And the best way I can describe Brockhoggies is that the quickest way to get a Brockhoggie to do something is to tell them they can't do it. And I knew she didn't expect me to read this book. It had no pictures in it. I was in first grade. It's The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Um, and so then I started bothering her. I went there, "What's this word?" She says, "Well, sound it out." So I sounded out what I could and other words. And The Hobbit had a lot of other words I had never seen in print before. I went to her and I said, "What's this word?" And then she taught me how to use a dictionary. I proceeded to go through that. And a long story short is I read The Hobbit in first grade and I read The Lord of the Rings in the next 2 years, including all the appendices. Uh, and after that, I was ruined for school assignments. I actually got in trouble in first grade. Actually, I was got in trouble in second grade because this happened the summer in between grades. Um, I got in trouble because I was reading The Hobbit and I was supposed to be doing our English book, which was See Dick Run. And because I wasn't doing See Dick Run, I said, "Well, I've read that." And she said, "No, this is the time you're supposed to be doing that, and you're not supposed to be reading your own book." Grade school. I was reading The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, but I got in trouble because I wasn't keeping up with See Dick Run. Well, that's probably the story of my life. I've been in the wrong place, the wrong time, and not at the level that people expected me to be at. And I'm kind of in that way now. I'm a Jeffersonian. I believe in a Jeffersonian republic, and I can see where things have changed technologically wise, and so that there's other concerns that we have today. But in there, there's no political home for me. I've talked with a new friend I made on Facebook, and we were video chatting, and he said, "Are you sure you're not a progressive?" And I said, "Actually, I'm a Jeffersonian in many ways, and I believe the writings of the founding fathers. And there is no political home for me today. I cannot be a Democrat. I cannot be a Republican. I used to be for a time. I was what was called a old style Southern Democrat, in that I believed in individual rights. I was a union steward when I was a federal officer, an immigration officer. I did that after I got out of the military and no longer served as a pastor. September 11th happened, and when the Twin Towers went down, I went back to work for the government service. I knew that the government had spent over $1 million training me to be a counterintelligence agent, and I figured that with everything going on, I should probably pursue security again. So I have all of this wide range of education. I read approximately 3 books a month, and they are like the history books I have behind me, or political science, or other commentaries. They aren't fiction. I do read science fiction and fantasy occasionally. Yeah, I like Star Wars. Obviously, I like Star Trek. I've got Qui-Gon on my right shoulder. I've got Captain America. Um, I've got two of my Civil War heroes up there, General Lee and General Jackson. And they're General Stuart. And the other stories, the Civil War cavalry generals, Buford at Gettysburg, they're what led me into joining the cavalry in the first place. Um, God led me into being a pastor. I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would be a pastor. But I and I've maintained my ordination through through ULC to maintain what legal requirements I have with the government and continue to serve God and serve my country in the best way possible that I know how. In order to do that, I have started SabersEdge Association. Um, so I'm giving you my life story, but I wanted to explain why I use Daniel Saber and why I use Rivan Elan and how I got to where I am. Um, I got COVID in March of 2020. When it was just starting, nobody really knew what was going on. I was hospitalized and they gave me oxygen treatments. Fortunately, it didn't put me on a ventilator. That didn't seem to go well for a lot of people. Um, but they gave me the same oxygen treatments I had had with asthma. I no longer had asthma. It got in the way of my ministry, and I prayed to God and asked Him to take away my asthma so that I could serve His people better. And I have not had an asthma attack since. That was over 20 years ago. I carried my inhaler around with me for 2 years because I'm not stupid. I know asthma is dangerous. But after 2 years of me never having to need it again, I set that aside. So COVID reminded me a lot of asthma. I had trouble breathing, a lot of trouble breathing. But I was able to go through that. However, one of the side effects of that was it attacked a weakened liver. For years, because of my back pain, the VA had given me huge doses of ibuprofen back in the days before we knew how harmful ibuprofen was to the liver. At least I was never told how harmful it was to the liver. And so my liver was weakened and it failed uh, during that year I had COVID. And when it failed, I went into the hospital 27 times for anywhere from 2 days to 10 days. 27 times from 2 days to 10 days. So I was in the hospital a lot in 2020. And by the end of the year, my liver had completely failed. And I'm kind of down on government healthcare because I think private healthcare is what saved my life. I had, because I'm disabled, I can draw on veterans disability and get free healthcare. The Veterans Association had not even listed me as on the list for a transplant yet when my liver failed. And it was my civilian healthcare that I maintained through being a retired federal officer that saved my life. It got me a liver transplant, and that was over a year ago through people's prayers and the grace of God. Um, my blood has all returned back to normal, and it seems to be going well. And I realized that about 1 out of 10 people who have that. I was talking to someone the other day, and her brother had had that, and his heart hadn't survived the surgery, and it gave out. And I know that there's a lot of people that don't make it through that. When I was suffering during that year of hell, my son would sneak upstairs to check on me. He told me afterwards he was always afraid he would find me dead on the couch. So I would lay on the couch and watch TV. So the TV would distract me from all the pain and suffering that I was going through, so that I could get some sleep. Because if I laid in bed, all the pain comes rushing back into me. Psychologically, it's called distraction. And you distract yourself from the pain by doing something else so you don't think about it. So I would do that to get some sleep. And he would sneak upstairs to see if I was still alive on the couch. And it was close. I had to be rushed to the hospital at one point to the hospital in Kansas City, 4 hours away from where I lived. And I made it. But during that time, I thought, this isn't fair. I've given my life to my country and to God's people. And I and my country are dying at the same time. There were riots all over the United States, fires burning, um, and things were really disruptive. When I came out of my surgery, I felt like I had a new lease on life, that God had essentially brought me back from the brink of death, literally had brought me back from the brink of death. And without the transplant, I would have died. Um, I've, as I said, I've read science fiction and fantasy. I said to my doctor, I said, you check this liver for just about everything. And the one thing you didn't check for the zombie virus. I was looking through everything that was done to secure it. And he looked at me and he apparently was familiar with that type of literature and those movies. And he said, if you got the zombie virus, you give me that liver back because it's a perfectly good liver. And if you're a zombie, you don't need one. And so we both laughed. Uh, when you're in situations like that, I find it's easier to laugh than it is to cry. It's more productive to laugh about your situation than it is to stew over it and complain about it all the time. But uh, I am in a tight way here. Uh, as I said, I feed my family through food service because my wife's unable to work. She's been disabled also. And so we lost her full-time income. Uh, I may not be physically able, but my mind is sharp, and I have a lot of knowledge from reading throughout my life and through my formal education, as well as my experience in the military and as a federal officer in immigration and as a pastor. And I bring all of those things together. In Saber's Edge, I talk about what the country needs to heal in the problems that I see with the country. And one of the problems I see is that in this last year, all of my help financially has come from friends, from Christians, from non-Christians as well, from pagans that I know, um, and from church organizations and private organizations. The amount of paperwork that it takes to get government assistance has prevented me from getting government assistance through this whole time. There are many laws and regulations that we have in this country that mean well, but they don't produce good results. And that's a lot of what Saber's Edge is about. If you are conservative or if you are very much on the left, you aren't going to like it because I say what I feel God wants me to say, what I have learned through the years. I believe that God's brought all of my experience together for this point. And healing the country doesn't require left or right. In fact, left and right is an artificial dichotomy that was created. Um, it became largely popular in the confrontation with communism. And the extreme left was considered communism, and the extreme right was often considered fascism. But this left and right dichotomy is foreign to the United States. The very term comes from Parliament, where they had people who sat on one side, the left and the right. Um, but the United States was not like that. Uh, so left and right is foreign to our way of thinking. Americans had always thought, is this something that makes us more free or less free? Does it oppress people or does it liberate them? There's a lot of ignorance about history nowadays. Thomas Jefferson is lambasted for being a slaveholder when he is the first president of the United States who signed into law outlawing the foreign slave trade. That was in 1807, which is the same year that Britain signed into law a banning of the foreign slave trade, except that in Britain, they allowed foreign slave trade to continue in their colonies. The United States banned it throughout the United States. You couldn't bring in any more slaves. And another thing that people don't know is that our Declaration of Independence would have been 3 pages long because Jefferson wrote a full page about how heinous it was to enslave men. And there's only a couple words that he put in the Declaration of Independence in all capitals. But when he referred to the African slave trade, he said the United Kingdom, the Crown of England, has enslaved men in all capital letters. Now, it serves people's political agenda to make a big deal of warping the facts of our history. And slavery is a fact of our history. But the warping of our history and the oversimplification of things does us no good. It keeps us from learning the lessons of history. so that we can avoid making the mistakes again. And as I read about the American Civil War and the things that led up to that, I see we are doing the exact same thing today. There were two groups at the time of the American Civil War that did not care if they destroyed America in order to get their results. One group were called the Fire Eaters in the South, and they owned the media, which at the time was newspapers, and the major newspaper editors were also large slave owners, and they pushed the issue of slavery to the point where they wanted to withdraw from the Union to protect their slave holdings. And they didn't care if they destroyed America as long as they protected their financial institution. Now, that was not most of the South. In fact, we have letters of those editors writing each other from various states and saying, we need to come together and we need to make everybody terrified that the North is going to come down and free our slaves by force and have them revolt and kill everybody. Now, there was reason for believing that. In the Dominican Republic, which Haiti in that area, um, there had been a slave revolt against the French slave owners, and uh, they had killed all of the whites when they came to power. All of the white slave owners had been killed. And that had happened just years before the Civil War. And everyone in the South, whether they were a slave owner or not, was afraid that that was going to happen because the Haiti not only killed the slave owners, they killed all whites. And so they used that as a way of stirring up fear in the South. There were other issues. There was the tariff, economics. The I've read one historian describe the Civil War as the last great war between the Germano-English um, industrialists and the Celtic um, rural community, because the South was very much a Celtic community. It was in the South that you would find signs on your shop that said "Gone fishing," because if the business was slow, um, that the South would have been the author of those commercials that said, like, love of your children, priceless. They believed that family issues were more important. And by the time of the Civil War, most of the slave owners had grown up playing with black friends. Anyone who's lived on a farm knows that other kids live a ways away. And on horseback and walking, it was even farther away. And often the slave owners would be playing with a black boy the same age as them, and they would go hunting together. They would go fishing together. Um, there was one guy in the Southern Army at the Battle of Big Bethel that his slave fought right alongside of him, and he wasn't part of the army because they couldn't actually be part of the army. But he was there with the master that he grew up with from just a little boy that he hunted with and fished with, and he was supporting him on the battlefield. And his slave shot an Union officer. And there was another man, uh, this the slave and his master and another man were the three best shots in the unit. And they argued over who got the officer. And um, this man who was the master said, if my slave said that he made that shot, then he made it, because he has never lied in his whole life to me. He's an honest man, and he is the best shot in the county. And people in the unit, that settled the argument as to who had actually made the shot and brought down the Union officer. Now, Civil War is a difficult time. Today is a difficult time. It's not easy to tell what to believe. In the Civil War and every other period of history, telling right from wrong and deciding what to believe was just as difficult as it is today. And if you have a simplistic belief in history that these guys were the good guys and these guys were the bad guys, you don't understand history at all. Because there are good and bad guys on both sides. The South wanted to protect slavery. The power, the fire eaters that stirred up the trouble, didn't care if they destroyed America in order to protect it. There was another group in the North in New England, the abolitionists. They were fine with destroying America as long as they could get rid of slavery. John Brown, I don't like to quote him because I consider him a terrorist. He hacked people to pieces in front of their wife and daughter um, because they were from the South. They didn't even have to own slaves, but just because they were from the South, he hacked them to pieces with his sons with a machete. And so I don't consider him a hero at all. I consider him a psychopath. No matter what his intentions were, no matter what his goal was, the way he went about it, in my mind, was evil. And life back then was as complex as it is now. It may not have moved as fast. Information may not have moved as fast, but it was complex. And people had just as much mind deciding who they were going to stand for, just as much trouble as we do today, trying to figure out what is true and what isn't. All they could do is go by the newspapers, go what they knew of history, and make their own decisions, which is what we do. That's what SabersEdge is supposed to help with. SabersEdge is here to help heal our country in the best way that I know how, by bringing out falsehoods, by bringing out what I can use with my intelligence training uh, to get down to the truth and reveal what the lies are. We used to do that with communist governments and communist movements, identifying where the money went and where the lies went to see where the interests were that were warping the truth and trying to bring about war. Today, there are many interests that are warping the truth and trying to bring about war. And SabersEdge is trying to make a point of exposing those. I need your support on Patreon to do that and to continue that. And the address will be down below. As Of Nature's God is more about our finding our relationship with God, whatever name you may use for the deity. I used the term of nature's God. It was something that Jefferson used a lot, and it was a term used all the way back to the ancient Greeks by philosophers. Nature knows who God is. Humans may argue as to which denomination is right, which religion is right, and we may not be able to agree, but nature knows what this divine power is that has formed the universe. And more on the macro and micro level, scientists have come to be aware. Um, there's a book called Frontiers of Continuity, and I don't wish that book on anyone. It's extremely difficult to read unless you have a science background. I read it, so you don't have to. But in that, Frontiers of Continuity, it noted how there's a pattern that runs from the microverse to the macroverse. From the very smallest microscopic reality, the same pattern runs through all existence to universes and the physics of suns and the way the galaxy works. And this whole pattern belies any idea that the universe is random. And so while it didn't go out and talk about God, it talked about intelligent design. There seems to be an intelligent design behind evolution, behind the way the world exists, the way science develops. Jordan Peterson recently noted that if we are not made in the image of God, there is no reason that our rights should matter to anyone. There is no reason our opinions should matter to anyone. There's no reason for democracy, because the assumption that we are valuable creations of the living God is what makes democracy make sense. It was piety and the most pious philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome that came up with the ideas of democracy and a republic. The founding fathers didn't like democracy because all democracies failed and collapsed into tyranny. And our move toward democracy seems to be doing the same thing. It's producing chaos, the same chaos that was produced by the Greeks with their democracy. And we are facing the possibility of tyranny taking over this republic. I would like to see a rebirth of the republic, a rebirth of the values that formed the republic, and a rebirth of the discussions that were made as to how to best promote the rights of the individual and the rights of people so that all can grow and be happy in life. OfNature'sGod.com is about for the individual what SabersEdge Online is about for the nation states. OfNature'sGod.com is about connecting with this deity, with the source of all life, what's called Das Ding an sich, the ground of all being. You'll be able to tell my videos apart because if I am talking about politics, it'll be Daniel Saber with my cavalry hat, and this is how I dress normally during the day. I have a 1800s vest and my cavalry hat and my plume on the side because I'm a Civil War fan. If I'm talking about Of Nature's God, I will probably be wearing my monk's alb, which is what I wear when preaching. So you'll be able to tell at a glance when you see the videos uh, which I'm talking about. So if you aren't interested in Of Nature's God, you can focus in on um, the politics, political science, and the political philosophy that grounds this nation. Where if you're interested in your own relationship with the divine, das Ding an sich, the ground of all being, you can look for the monk's robe, and I won't have the hat. If you find me on the street, I'll have my hat, probably be wearing my vest. I usually wear blue, but I like the shade of red as well, especially during Pentecost. I will wear red a lot, but usually I wear blue, and if I don't wear the vest, I wear what we used to call John Wayne shirts because it has the double-breasted buttons. Um, That's just the way I prefer to dress. It's a free country, and I dress the way I want to. I think we all should. We shouldn't worry about what other people think of us. We should dress how we want to. We should live how we want to. And we should believe and vote how we want to, and not the way someone tells us to, or the way we think that we should because it will get people to like us. I've talked much longer than I intended to. This is not the video that I wanted to do. So I will make another one which has a short video and explains the situation and asks support through patreon.com for Of Nature's God and Saber's Edge. Thank you very much. God bless, and may the force be with you. Liberty and justice for all.